Thomas Hayes was a respected man in his small town of Cedille. A successful real estate agent, he was known for his charming personality and dedication to his family. Married to his high school sweetheart, Emma, and father to 2 teenage daughters, Thomas appeared to have the perfect life. But beneath this polished exterior lurked a dark secret that would shatter everything. It all started innocently enough. Thomas's best friend, James Thornton, had been married to Vanessa for nearly a decade. Vanessa was beautiful, intelligent, and seemingly devoted to her husband. The two couples were inseparable, often spending weekends together, hosting barbecues, and celebrating holidays as a tight-knit group. They were the kind of friends everyone envied. But as time passed, the dynamic between Thomas and Vanessa began to change. There was a subtle shift, fleeting glances held too long, lingering touches, and a chemistry that neither could ignore. The friendship they once cherished now carried an undercurrent of forbidden desire. One evening, after a few too many glasses of wine during a casual dinner party at the Hayes' home, Thomas and Vanessa found themselves alone in the kitchen. Emma and James had stepped outside to check on the kids, leaving them in a charged silence. Vanessa turned to Thomas, her eyes glistening with something he had never seen before. "Thomas," she whispered, "do you ever wonder what it would be like if things were different?" He knew what she meant, but the question caught him off guard. Before he could respond, she leaned in and kissed him, her lips soft and urgent. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Thomas knew it was wrong, but he kissed her back, the rush of adrenaline and lust overwhelming his sense of morality. From that night on, everything changed. The once innocent gatherings now carried a secretive tension that only they could feel. Thomas and Vanessa began meeting in secret, finding stolen moments in hotel rooms on the outskirts of town and exchanging passionate texts under the noses of their unsuspecting spouses. The affair was intoxicating and all-consuming, but it was also dangerous. Thomas tried to convince himself that he could keep things under control, that no one would ever find out. But deep down, he knew that secrets like theirs never stayed buried for long, and he was right. One Friday evening, Emma, who had been noticing Thomas's increasing distance, stumbled upon his phone while he was in the shower. A message from Vanessa flashed on the screen. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I miss you." The words were like a punch to the gut. Her hands shaking, Emma read through the thread of messages, the full extent of their betrayal hitting her like a tidal wave. Heartbroken and furious, Emma confronted Thomas. He tried to deny it at first, but the evidence was undeniable. Their marriage, their family, everything they had built together was on the verge of collapse. Emma was devastated, but her pain quickly turned to a cold, calculated resolve. "Does James know?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. Thomas shook his head, his eyes filled with guilt. "No, he doesn't." Vanessa said she would end it, that we would end it. Emma's expression hardened. "You're going to end this, Thomas. You're going to end it right now, or I will." Terrified of losing his family and destroying the friendship he had with James, Thomas agreed. He called Vanessa, his voice trembling as he told her it was over. Vanessa was stunned and hurt, but she reluctantly agreed, understanding the risks involved. But breaking things off was easier said than done. Vanessa's emotions were spiraling, and she wasn't ready to let go of Thomas. The affair had been an escape from her own unhappy marriage, and losing Thomas felt like losing a lifeline. She became increasingly desperate, sending Thomas messages and leaving voicemails that grew more frantic and erratic with each passing day. Then, one fateful night, everything spiraled out of control. It was a quiet evening in Cedille. Thomas was at home trying to patch things up with Emma when his phone rang. It was James. The panic in his voice was palpable. "Thomas, you need to get over here. It's Vanessa. She's gone crazy. She's threatening to kill herself." His heart sank. He knew this was his fault, that he had pushed her to this point. Without thinking, he grabbed his keys and rushed to the Thorntons' house, hoping he could somehow fix the mess he had created. When he arrived, the scene was chaotic. James was outside, pacing frantically, his face pale with fear. "She's locked herself in the bedroom," he said, his voice cracking. "I don't know what to do." Thomas nodded, his mind racing. He had to talk to her, calm her down. As he approached the bedroom door, he could hear Vanessa sobbing inside. He knocked gently. "Vanessa, it's me. Open the door, please. Let's talk." There was a long pause, then the sound of the lock clicking. Thomas pushed the door open and stepped inside, his heart pounding. Vanessa was sitting on the bed, her eyes red and swollen. She looked up at him, her face a mixture of anger, hurt, and desperation. "You said you loved me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You said you would leave her." Thomas felt a wave of guilt crash over him. He had made promises he couldn't keep, and now everything was falling apart. "Vanessa, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. We both did. But But this isn't the answer. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. I have nothing without you. Nothing. Before Thomas could respond, Vanessa reached under the bed and pulled out a gun. His heart stopped as she pointed it at him, her hand shaking. Vanessa, please, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Put the gun down. We can talk about this. But Vanessa's eyes were wild with pain and desperation. No, Thomas. If I can't have you, then no one can. In that moment, Thomas knew he had lost control of everything. As he stood frozen, staring into the barrel of the gun, the world seemed to slow down. And then there was a deafening bang. The gunshot echoed through the house, reverberating in the still night air. Thomas's ears rang as he staggered back, instinctively covering his face. His heart pounded as he realized he wasn't hit. His eyes widened as he saw Vanessa lying on the floor, a pool of blood spreading around her. She had turned the gun on herself. Thomas rushed to her side, his hands trembling as he pressed them to the wound in her chest, trying to stem the flow of blood. Vanessa, stay with me, he pleaded, but her eyes were already losing focus. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and he could feel her life slipping away beneath his fingertips. James burst into the room, his face contorted with shock and confusion. What the hell happened? He shouted, rushing to his wife's side. Thomas could barely speak, his mind reeling from the horror of what had just unfolded. She shot herself, he stammered, his voice shaking. I tried to stop her, but James's eyes were filled with rage and grief as he pushed Thomas away. Get out of my house, he screamed, cradling Vanessa's lifeless body in his arms. Thomas stumbled back, his heart pounding, his mind numb with shock. The sound of sirens filled the air, and within minutes, the house was swarming with police and paramedics. They tried to revive Vanessa, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead at the scene, and the house that had once been filled with laughter and friendship now felt cold and haunted. Thomas was taken to the police station for questioning. The officers were relentless, grilling him about the events leading up to Vanessa's death. He told them everything about the affair, about Emma finding out, about the desperate phone call from James. He left nothing out, knowing that any lie could trap him further in this nightmare. Did you have any intention of harming Vanessa? The detective asked, his eyes narrowing as he leaned across the table. No, of course not, Thomas replied, his voice hollow. I was trying to help her. I never wanted this to happen. The detective nodded slowly, jotting down notes. And what about the gun? Did you know she had one? Thomas shook his head, tears filling his eyes. No, I had no idea. She must have hidden it somewhere. The questioning went on for hours, but Thomas's story never changed. He was released in the early hours of the morning, his mind a blur of grief, guilt, and confusion. Emma was waiting for him outside the station, her face pale and drawn. What happened? She whispered, her eyes searching his face for answers. She killed herself, Thomas said, his voice breaking. I tried to stop her, but I couldn't. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she pulled him into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry, Thomas, but we have to be strong for the girls, for us. For a while, it seemed like the nightmare might end there. The police ruled Vanessa's death a suicide, and Thomas was not charged with any crime. But the damage was done. Shattered by the loss of his wife, severed all ties with Thomas and Emma. The town buzzed and Thomas found himself increasingly isolated and consumed by guilt. But just when things seemed to be settling down, a new piece of evidence came to light that would turn the case on its head. A week after Vanessa's death, a forensics team found something troubling. A second bullet hole, hidden in the wooden floor under the bed, suggested there had been another shot fired that night, one that had gone unnoticed in the chaos. The angle and trajectory indicated it had been fired from a standing position near the doorway, not from where Vanessa had been lying. This revelation changed everything. The police reopened the investigation, now suspecting that someone else might have been in the room when Vanessa died. Suspicion immediately fell on Thomas. The town turned hostile, whispers of murder and betrayal following him wherever he went. Determined to clear his name, Thomas hired a lawyer and began his own investigation. He was desperate to find out who had been in that room and what had really happened that night. It didn't take long for him to realize that the only person who might have known the truth was Vanessa herself. Thomas remembered the frantic messages Vanessa had sent him in the days leading up to her death. She had been paranoid, convinced that someone was watching her, following her. He had dismissed it as the ramblings of a desperate woman, but now he wasn't so sure. He started digging into Vanessa's life, looking for anything that could explain what had happened. He discovered that Vanessa had been in significant debt, owing money to several shady characters. There were rumors that she had been blackmailed, threatened by someone who knew about the affair and her past. The more he dug, the more he realized how little he He actually knew about the woman he had risked everything for. And then he found it, a series of emails Vanessa had sent to an anonymous account just days before her death. The messages were frantic, filled with fear and desperation. "I can't keep paying you," one of them read. "I don't have any more money. Please just leave me alone." Another message, sent the night before she died, was even more chilling. "You said you'd leave us alone if I paid you. I did everything you asked. Please, I just want this to be over." Thomas felt a cold chill run down his spine. Someone had been extorting Vanessa, pushing her to the brink, and he had been too blind to see it. But who was it? And how far would they go to keep their secrets hidden? As he read through the emails again, a name caught his eye, a name he recognized. It was someone he had never suspected, someone close to both him and Vanessa. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He knew who had been in that room the night Vanessa died, and he knew he had to find proof before it was too late. The emails had led Thomas to a name he never would have expected. Michael Parker, another close friend of his and James's, someone who had been part of their circle for years. Michael was a lawyer, a seemingly upstanding member of the community, and the last person anyone would suspect of blackmailing Vanessa. Thomas felt a cold rage building inside him as he pieced together the truth. Michael must have found out about the affair and used it to extort Vanessa, threatening to ruin her and Thomas if she didn't pay. But when she ran out of money, things must have escalated. Thomas realized that Michael had likely been at the house that night, pushing Vanessa to the breaking point and possibly even firing the second shot. Determined to confront Michael, Thomas arranged to meet him at a secluded spot near the lake, away from prying eyes. The sun was setting as Thomas pulled up, his heart pounding. Michael was already there, leaning against his car with a smug expression on his face. "Thomas, what's this all about?" Michael asked, his voice calm and controlled. Thomas clenched his fists, barely able to contain his fury. "You know exactly what this is about, Michael. You blackmailed Vanessa, you drove her to suicide, and you were there that night, weren't you?" Michael's face didn't change, but Thomas saw a flicker of something dark in his eyes. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said smoothly. "Vanessa was a mess, Thomas. She was desperate and unstable. I tried to help her, but she wouldn't listen." "Help her?" Thomas spat. "You threatened her. I saw the emails, Michael. She was terrified of you. She begged you to leave her alone." Michael's his expression turning cold. "You really think I'd risk everything for a few $1,000? You're delusional, Thomas. Vanessa was a time bomb waiting to go off. I just gave her a little push." Thomas felt a surge of anger. "You were in the house that night, weren't you? You fired that second shot." Michael smirked. "I was there, yes, but I didn't kill her. I just wanted to scare her, to make sure she knew I wasn't bluffing. She pulled the trigger herself. That's on her, not me." Thomas lunged forward, grabbing Michael by the collar. "You son of a bitch. You're the reason she's dead." Michael shoved him back, his eyes blazing. "Back off, Thomas. You think you can blame me for this?" She was weak. She couldn't handle the pressure. "I didn't make her put that gun to her head." Thomas stared at him, breathing heavily, his mind racing. He realized Michael was right in one sense. There was no way to prove he had killed Vanessa. But he also knew Michael had manipulated and tormented her until she couldn't take it anymore. "Why, Michael? Why did you do it?" Thomas asked, his voice breaking. "We were friends. Why would you destroy everything?" Michael's smile was cruel. "You don't get it, do you? You and James, you've always had it all. The perfect families, the perfect lives. And me, I'm the one who cleans up your messes, the one who's always in your shadow. I wanted to see you both lose, to see you fall apart like the rest of us." Thomas felt sick. "You're a monster." Michael shrugged. "Maybe, but there's nothing you can do about it. Vanessa's dead, and there's no proof I did anything wrong. You think the cops are going to believe the word of a cheating husband over mine?" Thomas knew he was right. He was trapped, and there was nothing he could do. But then he remembered something Vanessa had said in one of her emails. "I have a recording of our last conversation. I'll send it to Thomas if you don't stop." Thomas's heart raced as he pulled out his phone and started searching through the files Vanessa had sent him. His hands were shaking as he found it, a recording labeled Michael. He pressed play, and Michael's voice filled the air, cold and threatening. "You think you can just stop paying and walk away, Vanessa? I'll ruin you and Thomas. I'll make sure everyone knows what you are. You'll lose everything." Thomas watched as Michael's face turned white. "Where did you get that?" "It doesn't matter," Thomas said quietly. What matters is that this recording is going straight to the police. You're done, Michael. For the first time, Thomas saw fear in Michael's eyes. Wait, Thomas, we can work something out. Save it, Thomas interrupted. You destroyed Vanessa's life, and you tried to destroy mine. Now you're going to pay for it. Michael's composure crumbled as Thomas walked away, dialing the detective's number. He knew it wasn't enough to bring Vanessa back, but it was something. And as he drove away, he felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. The nightmare was over, and justice, however small, would be served.